The second elevator opened on its own at 3:17 a.m. No one called it. No one was inside. I watched it on the monitor, doors sliding apart, the fluorescent light flickering once, then holding steady on an empty steel box. I checked the call log. No floor request. No keycard swipe. No maintenance override. It just opened. That was Tuesday. By Thursday, I understood why the old staff never talked about it. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Elliot Vance, and I've been a night shift intake technician at the Cook County Office of the Medical Examiner since November of last year. That's a clinical way of saying I receive dead bodies between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., confirm their paperwork, log them into the system, and make sure they end up in the right cold storage drawer. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting. Most nights, it's actually boring, long stretches of nothing punctuated by the occasional ambulance bay buzzer and the paperwork that follows. The building itself is old. Not ancient, but mid-1980s institutional, poured concrete, fluorescent panels, long hallways with that particular shade of gray-green paint that only exists in government buildings. It was renovated in 2011, mostly cosmetic. New desk in the lobby, new computer systems, updated HVAC. But the bones of the building are the same. The layout, the plumbing, the electrical, all original. And the elevators. There are two. The first elevator, Elevator A, is the main one. It connects the intake bay on the ground floor to the examination rooms on the second floor and cold storage in the basement. It's a standard freight elevator, oversized to accommodate gurneys. Stainless steel interior, fluorescent overhead, a slight hydraulic groan when it moves. It works fine. I use it dozens of times a night. The second elevator, Elevator B, is at the far end of the east corridor. If you didn't know it was there, you'd walk right past it. The hallway leading to it isn't exactly hidden, but it's not part of any normal workflow either. The lights in that section are older, the kind that take a second to warm up when you flip the switch. There's a faint chemical smell that lingers there, not formaldehyde exactly, but something adjacent. Something sharper. Elevator B is a service elevator. Smaller than A, but still large enough for a gurney. According to the building plans, it connects the same 3 floors. According to the maintenance records, it's been operational since the building opened in 1986. According to everyone who works nights, you don't use it. I want to be clear, no one ever handed me a list. There was no laminated card. No formal orientation warning. The way I learned about Elevator B was gradual, almost organic, the way you learn that a certain neighbor doesn't like to be spoken to, or that a specific chair in the break room belongs to someone even though there's no sign. My first week, I was being trained by a woman named Denise. She'd worked the night shift for 11 years. Patient, methodical, not the type to exaggerate. On my second night, I was wheeling a body from intake to cold storage and turned right at the junction instead of left. Not that way, Denise said. Not sharp, but firm. Isn't there an elevator down there? We use Elevator A. Is the other one broken? She didn't answer immediately. She adjusted the clipboard in her hand, looked at me the way a teacher looks at a student who's asked a question that's technically valid but socially complicated, and said, "It's not broken. We just don't use it." I didn't push. You learn fast in a place like this that certain things aren't discussed because there's no productive discussion to be had. I figured it was a union thing, or a maintenance issue, or some bureaucratic holdover that was easier to ignore than to fix. For the first 2 months, I didn't think about elevator B at all. December was busy. Winters always are: hypothermia cases, accidents on icy roads, the quiet epidemic of elderly people found alone in cold apartments days after they've passed. The intake bay was active almost every night, and I settled into the rhythm of the job. Badge in at 9:45. Check the log from the evening shift. Confirm any pending intakes. Walk the floor. Check cold storage temperatures. Settle in. The overnight is usually just me and one other technician. For most of December, that was a guy named Terrence. Mid-50s, reading glasses, kept a small radio tuned to jazz at low volume behind the front desk. He'd been there almost as long as Denise. We didn't talk much, which suited both of us. One night, December 19th, I remember because of the paperwork, we received 3 bodies in a 2-hour window. Car accident on the expressway. It was hectic by our standards, meaning we actually had to move quickly. I was transporting the second body to cold storage and found myself waiting for elevator A, which Terrence was using to bring down the third. I stood there with the gurney, listening to the hydraulics humming behind the closed doors, and without thinking, I glanced down the east corridor. The hallway was dark, as usual. But the elevator indicator above elevator B's doors was lit. Not the call button. The floor indicator, the small digital display above the doors that shows which floor the car is on. It read B4 basement. That was fine. Unremarkable. Elevators sit where they were last sent. But as I stood there, it changed. B became 1. Then 2. Then back to 1. Then B again. I watched it cycle through this sequence 3 times in maybe 15 seconds. Then it stopped on 1, my floor, and I heard the faint mechanical groan of the car settling into position. The doors didn't open. Elevator A arrived behind me with a chime. Terrence's voice echoed from inside, "You coming?" I turned around, loaded the gurney, and went to the basement. I didn't mention what I'd seen. I'm not sure why. It didn't feel like something to mention. It felt like something I'd noticed that I wasn't supposed to notice, like catching a glimpse of something in your peripheral vision that was meant to stay peripheral. After that night, I started paying attention. Not obsessively. I didn't seek it out. But once you notice something, your brain catalogs it whether you want it to or not. Over the next several weeks, I began keeping a small record in the Notes app on my phone. Not because I was investigating, just because the pattern bothered me, and writing things down made them feel less slippery. December 22nd, 1:40 a.m., elevator B indicator cycling. B 1-2-1, B duration, 20 seconds. No door movement. December 28th, 3:03 a.m., heard hydraulic sound from east corridor during quiet period. Indicator showed car moving from B to 2. Stayed on 2 for approximately 4 minutes, then returned to B. January 4th, 2:55 a.m., indicator active again. Same cycling pattern. Stopped on 1. Doors remained closed. January 11th, 12:15 a.m., this one was different. I was walking past the East Corridor junction on a routine floor check. The hallway lights were off, as they usually are, the switches at the far end, near the elevator. But I could see the indicator glow from where I stood. It was on 1. And the doors were open. I didn't walk toward them. I stood at the junction for maybe 10 seconds, looking down a 40-foot hallway at a rectangle of fluorescent light where the elevator car waited. Empty, from what I could see. Just the back wall of a steel box. Then the doors closed. I wrote in my notes, first time doors opened with no call. Car appeared empty. Lights on inside. I went back to the front desk and finished my shift. It was late January when I first brought it up with someone directly. Not Terrence, he'd transferred to days by then. My new overnight partner was a younger guy named Marcus, maybe 28, who'd been on nights for about 2 years. He was more talkative than Terrence, which I appreciated on slow shifts, and less formal, which meant he was more likely to actually answer a question. We were in the break room around 2 a.m. on a dead quiet Wednesday, no intake calls, nothing pending. I'd been thinking about what I'd seen and decided to just ask. "What's the deal with the elevator in the east corridor?" Marcus was stirring powdered creamer into his coffee. He didn't stop stirring, but his rhythm changed, slowed slightly, then resumed. "What do you mean?" "I've seen it moving. On its own. The indicator cycles through floors, and sometimes the doors open." "Is it on some kind of automated diagnostic?" He took a sip of his coffee, set it down, and leaned back. "How often?" "I've noticed it maybe 6 or 7 times since December." "At night?" "Always. Usually between 1 and 4. He nodded slowly. Not surprised. Not dismissive. More like someone confirming something they already knew. "It does that," he said. "That's it. It does that." "Look, I asked the same thing when I started. Denise told me what she told everybody, don't use it, don't call it, and if the door's open, don't get in." I pushed her on it once, and she said something I never forgot. "What?" She said, "The elevator doesn't move because someone calls it. It moves because it's making a delivery." I waited for him to laugh, or qualify it, or add something. He didn't. "A delivery," I repeated. Her word. Not mine. "From where?" Marcus looked at me, and his expression wasn't fear exactly, it was the careful, calibrated blankness of someone who had decided a long time ago not to think about something too deeply. She didn't say. And I didn't ask again. February was when things shifted. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But the texture of the nights changed. I started to notice something about the timing. Every time elevator be activated on its own, we had received a body within the previous 2 hours. I went back through my notes and cross-referenced with the intake log. Every single instance matched. December 22nd, intake at 11:50 p.m., elevator at 1:40 a.m. December 28th, intake at 1:15 a.m., elevator at 3:03 a.m. January 4th, intake at 12:30 a.m., elevator at 2:55 a.m. The gap varied. Sometimes 90 minutes. Sometimes just over an hour. But the correlation was absolute. Elevator B never moved on nights when we received no bodies. I showed Marcus the data on a slow shift. He looked at my phone, scrolled through the entries, and handed it back. "Okay," he said. "That's all you've got?" "Okay. What do you want me to say, Elliot?" "That it's a coincidence." "Fine, it's a coincidence. You want me to say it's something else?" "I'm not going to do that either, because then I have to think about what that something else is, and I come here 5 nights a week." "Fair enough." But I couldn't stop. February 14th. A Friday. Intake at 11:20 p.m., a Jane Doe, apparent overdose, found in a parking structure downtown. Standard processing. I logged her in, assigned drawer 14 in cold storage, transported her via elevator A to the basement, confirmed placement, and returned to the ground floor. At 1:08 a.m., elevator B's indicator began cycling. I was at the front desk and couldn't see it from there, but I'd started leaving a small wireless camera, my own, a cheap security cam I bought online, pointed down the east corridor. The feed went to my phone. I watched. B 1-2-1 B. The usual pattern. Then it stopped on B. The doors opened. On the camera feed, I couldn't see inside the car, the angle was wrong, showing only the corridor and the lit rectangle of the open doors. But I could see the light from inside the elevator casting a long trapezoid of pale fluorescence onto the hallway floor. The doors stayed open for 47 seconds. I timed it. Then something changed. The light inside the car flickered. Not the hallway lights, just the elevator's internal fluorescence. A brief interruption, maybe half a second. When the light steadied again, the shadow on the floor was different. There was something in the elevator. I don't mean I saw a figure. I mean the geometry of the light had changed, the shape of the illuminated trapezoid on the corridor floor now had an interruption in it. A vertical shadow near the back of the car that hadn't been there before. Something was blocking part of the light source. The doors closed. The indicator showed the car moving from B to 2. Then back to B. Then it went dark. I sat at the front desk with my phone in my hand for a long time after that. The building was silent. The HVAC hummed. Somewhere, a pipe ticked as it cooled. I went to the basement. I don't know why. I think I needed to confirm that everything was where I'd left it. I took elevator down and walked the cold storage hall. Everything was in order. The temperature log read 38 degrees Fahrenheit across all units. All drawers were properly sealed. The Jane Doe was in drawer 14, exactly where I'd placed her. I pulled the drawer open to check. She was there. Intact. Undisturbed. The toe tag was correct, the paperwork sleeve attached to the gurney rail was complete. But the drawer was cold. Not cold the way it's supposed to be, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, standard preservation temperature. Cold the way a freezer is cold. I could see my breath when I leaned over her. The metal rails of the drawer had a faint rime of frost. I checked the thermostat panel. Drawer 14 read 38 degrees Fahrenheit. I placed my hand flat on the interior surface of the drawer. It was ice cold. Well below freezing. The display was wrong. Or the display was showing me what it wanted to show me. I slid the drawer closed and went upstairs. I need to tell you about the log discrepancy, because that's when I stopped being curious and started being afraid. Every body that comes through intake is logged electronically. Name or Jane/John Doe designation, date and time of receipt, preliminary cause of death, assigned drawer number, receiving technician's ID. The system timestamps everything automatically. It's straightforward, and in 5 months, I'd never seen an error. On February 18th, I was reviewing the week's intake log at the start of my shift, something I did routinely, to see what the evening crew had processed before I came on. 7 bodies received that week. Normal for February. Except the log showed 8. I counted twice. 7 entries I could account for. I processed 3 of them myself, and the other 4 had intake sheets from the evening and day shifts. But there was an 8th entry, Timestamped 3:41 a.m. on February 16th, a Sunday. I'd been working that night. I checked my own notes. Nothing at 3:41 a.m. No ambulance call. No buzzer. No intake. The entry was minimal. No name, no Jane/John Doe designation. Cause of death, blank. Assigned drawer, 31. Receiving technician ID, none. Drawer 31 was at the far end of cold storage, past the main rows. I'd never used it. In 5 months, I'd never assigned a body past drawer 24. The higher numbered drawers were older, part of the original 1986 installation that hadn't been updated in the renovation. Some of them didn't even have working temperature displays. I went to the basement. The cold storage hall is long and straight, fluorescent lights overhead, numbered drawers on both sides, everything labeled and clean. I walked past the rows I knew, past 24, into the section I'd never had reason to visit. The lights here were dimmer. One of the overhead panels was dead, leaving a stretch of shadow between 27 and 30. Drawer 31 was at the very end, against the far wall. The label plate was slightly discolored, aged metal compared to the newer replacements elsewhere. There was no temperature display. I pulled the handle. The drawer slid open smoothly. Too smoothly for something supposedly unused for years. It was empty. Clean steel. No body. No sheet. No residue. But it wasn't the sterile emptiness of a drawer that had never been used. There was a faint impression on the surface, not quite a stain, not quite a mark, but a discoloration in the shape of something that had been there. A vaguely rectangular shadow, roughly 6 feet long, centered on the tray. And it was warm. Not room temperature. Warm. Like something alive had been lying there recently. I closed the drawer and left. At the front desk, I went back into the electronic log and looked at the 8th entry again. I wanted to screenshot it, document it, have something concrete. It was gone. 7 entries. The same 7 I could account for. No record of any intake at 3:41 a.m. No drawer 31 assignment. No anomalous entry. I checked the system's edit history. No deletions. No modifications. According to every digital record available to me, the 8th entry had never existed. I started dreading the East Corridor. Not in a dramatic way. I didn't have panic attacks or nightmares. It was more like an atmospheric shift, the way a room feels different when you know someone is standing just outside the door, even if you can't hear them. The East Corridor had that quality now. A sense of attendance. Something waiting with enormous patience. I kept my camera pointed at it. I checked the feed compulsively during slow hours. Most nights, nothing. Elevator B sat dormant, its indicator dark, its doors closed. A machine at rest. But on intake nights when we received bodies, it would wake up. Always the same pattern. Always 60 to 90 minutes after a body arrived. Always the cycling, B1-2-1B. Sometimes the doors opened. Sometimes they didn't. And now I noticed something new. The cycling was getting longer. In December, the indicator would cycle for 15 to 20 seconds. By February, it was running for a minute or more. By early March, I clocked one sequence at 3 minutes and 40 seconds, the indicator moving steadily, floor to floor, as if the elevator were making stops. picking things up, dropping things off, or as if whatever was using it had more to do. March 8, 2:47 a.m. This is the night I need to tell you about. We'd had a busy evening, 2 bodies processed between 10 p.m. and midnight. I'd done both intakes myself while Marcus handled paperwork. By 1 a.m., everything was settled. The building was quiet. At 2:13 a.m., Elevator B began its cycle. I watched on my phone. The usual pattern, but longer, almost 4 minutes. It stopped on the basement level. Doors opened. The light spilled out into the corridor as it always did. Then the doors closed, and the indicator went dark. I thought it was over. I put my phone down and started a temperature check on the intake log. At 2:47 a.m., my desk phone rang. This was unusual. The desk phone almost never rings during overnight. External calls go to the main line, which routes to voicemail after hours. Internal calls are rare, there's no one else in the building. I picked up. Silence. Not dead air, there was a quality to it, a faint ambient hum, like an open line in a room with ventilation running. I could hear space on the other end. Somewhere with hard surfaces and recycled air. Hello. Nothing. This is intake, night shift. Who is this? A sound. Very faint. At first I thought it was static, but it had a rhythm to it. A wet, organic rhythm, like slow breathing through a constricted passage. Then a click, and the line went dead. I checked the phone's call log. Internal extension. The call had come from extension 3140. I didn't recognize the number. Our extensions follow a pattern. The front desk is 1000, the exam rooms are 2000 series, the administrative offices are 4000 series. I'd never seen a 3000 series extension. I pulled up the building directory on the computer. Extensions were listed by floor and department. 1000s for ground floor. 2000s for second floor. 4000s for admin wing. Number 3000 series. I searched the full directory database. Extension 3140 did not exist. I sat there for a moment, processing this. Then I did something I shouldn't have done. I called it back. I dialed 3140 on the desk phone and listened. It rang. A real ring, not an error tone, not a disconnection notice. A standard internal ring, meaning the system recognized the extension and was routing the call. 1 ring. 2. 3. On the 4th ring, I heard the click of a connection opening. The same ambient hum. The same sense of a room with hard walls. But this time, underneath the hum, I heard something else. A drawer sliding open. The metallic scrape of steel runners, that specific sound I heard dozens of times a night. A cold storage drawer being pulled out on its rails. Then the breathing again. Closer this time. Not through the phone anymore. I could hear it in the building. Through the walls. Through the floor. Coming from below. I hung up. The silence that followed was the loudest silence I've ever experienced. I didn't go to the basement that night. When Marcus came back from his break at 3:15, I told him I wasn't feeling well and spent the rest of the shift at the front desk, watching my camera feed and trying to persuade myself that phone systems glitch, that buildings make sounds, that correlation isn't causation. But the next night, I did something methodical. I needed to understand the extension. The building's phone system was a legacy PBX, installed during the 2011 renovation but mapped onto the original wiring. I accessed the system configuration through the admin terminal using a login Denise had given me months ago for routine tasks. I searched for extension 3140. It existed in the system. Not as an assigned line. It was listed as a phantom extension, an artifact of the original wiring that had been mapped during installation but never connected to a physical phone. The system notes, written by some technician in 2011, read: Extension 3140, mapped to original junction box EBSUB. No physical instrument. Recommend decommission. R. Harwell, March 15, 2011. EBSUB. Elevator B, sublevel. The extension was mapped to a junction box inside the elevator shaft, somewhere below the basement floor. There was no phone there. There was no room there. According to the building plans, there was nothing below the basement except foundation and earth. But something had called me from it. I want to pause here and say something about fear, because I think it's important for understanding what happened next. When people imagine being afraid, they picture the acute kind, the racing heart, the fight or flight, the horror movie moment. And I experienced some of that. But the predominant feeling wasn't terror. It was wrongness. A deep, structural wrongness, like discovering a room in your house you've never seen before. Your brain doesn't scream. It just stalls. It tries to integrate the information, and when it can't, it produces this flat, gray, nauseating sensation that isn't quite fear and isn't quite confusion. It's closer to vertigo. The feeling of a floor that isn't level. That's what Elevator B gave me. Not screaming horror. Architectural vertigo. And it was getting worse. By mid-March, I had compiled enough data to see the full pattern, and the full pattern was this. Elevator B's activity was increasing in both frequency and duration. In December, it activated maybe twice a week, for 15 to 20 seconds. By March, it was activating every night we received a body, for 3 to 5 minutes. The cycling pattern was becoming more complex, no longer a simple B1-2-1B loop, but longer sequences with pauses at each floor, as though the car were stopping to let something on or off. And the bodies were changing. Not physically. Not in any way the pathologists would flag. But I noticed it in cold storage. Drawers that should have read 38 degrees Fahrenheit were running colder, sometimes significantly colder. Not all of them. Only the ones that had been occupied on nights when Elevator B was active. Drawer 14, where I'd placed the Jane Doe in February, consistently read 38 degrees Fahrenheit on the display but felt like it was below 20 degrees Fahrenheit to the touch. Other drawers showed the same discrepancy. The system said one thing. Reality said another. And then there was the weight. I weigh every body at intake. It's part of the standard processing. On March 19th, I processed a male decedent, 74 years old, natural causes, 183 pounds at intake. I placed him in drawer 9 and finished my paperwork. When the day shift pathologist pulled him for examination the next morning, he noted the weight as 176 pounds in his report. 7 pounds. I checked my scale. Calibrated. I checked my entry. 183, clearly recorded. The pathologist's scale was also calibrated, they check it daily. Somewhere between my intake and his examination, the body had lost 7 pounds. In a sealed, refrigerated drawer. In 8 hours. I pulled records quietly over the next 2 weeks. It wasn't every body, but it was consistent with the pattern. Bodies received on active nights when elevator B cycled, showed small but measurable weight discrepancies between intake and examination. Always lighter. Never by more than 8 or 9 pounds. Always within a range that could be attributed to normal post-mortem fluid loss, if you weren't looking closely. But I was looking closely. And the losses were accelerating. March 30th. I need to tell you about March 30th because that's when the elevator spoke. Not in words. I don't mean it literally spoke. But the building has a PA system, another legacy installation, ceiling-mounted speakers in every corridor, connected to the front desk console. It's used for fire drills and emergency announcements during the day. At night, it's off. The console is switched to standby. The speakers are silent. At 3:22 a.m., the PA system activated. A burst of static, sharp, sudden, like a microphone being keyed, followed by a sound I can only describe as environmental. Not a voice. Not mechanical. Something between a hum and a resonance, like hearing a very large space through a very small opening. Cavernous. Deep. The sound of air moving through somewhere vast and enclosed. It lasted 11 seconds. I timed it afterward on the security recording. Then the PA clicked off, and the building was silent again. I checked the console. It was still on standby. No input had been registered. The system showed no activation. But the recording was there. The security system captures audio from the front desk area, and when I played it back, the sound was clearly audible. 11 seconds of something that shouldn't have existed, broadcast through a system that wasn't turned on. I saved the file to a USB drive. I still have it. I've listened to it many times since. The more I listen, the more I hear. There are layers in the sound. Underneath the ambient resonance, there are smaller sounds, clicks, scrapes, and something that might be movement. Something large, shifting in a space with hard walls. And under that, so faint you need headphones and silence to catch it, something rhythmic. Breathing. Not human breathing. Too slow. Too deep. A single inhalation lasting 4 or 5 seconds, then an exhalation of equal length. The breathing of something with enormous lungs in an enormous room. Below the basement. Below the building. Where nothing is supposed to exist. I thought about quitting. I want to be honest about that. I thought about it every day in early April. I'd sit in my car in the parking lot before my shift, engine running, staring at the building's gray concrete facade, and I'd think, you could just leave. You could call in, go home, apply for something else tomorrow morning. But I didn't. And the reason I didn't is hard to articulate, but I'll try. It felt like the building knew I was paying attention. Not in a sentient way, I don't mean the walls had eyes. I mean the system, the pattern, the elevator, the logs, the sounds, had shifted to include me. I was part of the data now. Walking away wouldn't remove me from the dataset. It would just mean I couldn't see what was happening anymore. And not seeing felt worse than seeing. April 7th. Last week. A body came in at 11:45 p.m. Male, mid-50s, apparent cardiac event, found at home by his wife. Routine intake. I weighed him, 201 pounds, logged him in, assigned drawer 19, transported him to cold storage via elevator A. At 1:30 a.m., elevator B began cycling. I watched on my phone. The pattern had changed again. This time, instead of cycling through all 3 floors, the indicator moved from B to a symbol I'd never seen. Not a number. Not a letter. A dash. Just a small horizontal line on the display, like a minus sign. The elevator was going to a floor that wasn't B, wasn't 1, wasn't 2. A floor that the building didn't have. It stayed on the dash for 6 minutes. Then it returned to B. The doors opened. The light spilled out. And on the camera feed, I saw something step out of it. The resolution was poor. The camera was cheap. The corridor was dim. I have to be honest about the limitations of what I saw. But I watched the footage 17 times that night and many more times since, and I will tell you what I observed. A shape moved from inside the elevator car into the corridor. It was tall, it had to angle itself to clear the door frame, which I later measured at 6 feet 8 inches. It was narrow. It moved with a quality I can only describe as careful. Not slow, exactly. Deliberate. Each movement precise and intentional, like someone navigating a space they knew intimately in the dark. It moved down the corridor toward the junction. Toward cold storage. Toward the basement stairs. The camera's field of view ended at the corridor junction. The shape passed out of frame. I sat at the front desk, 30 feet from that junction, on the floor directly above cold storage, and I did not move. I did not breathe loudly. I did not do anything at all for 22 minutes. Then, on the camera feed, I watched the shape return. Same careful movement. Same deliberate precision. It entered elevator B. The doors closed. The indicator showed the car descending to the dash, to the floor that doesn't exist. Then darkness. I went to the basement at 4:15 a.m., when I was reasonably sure, though not certain, never certain, that it was over. Drawer 19. The body was there. Intact. Paperwork attached. 192 pounds. 9 pounds lighter than intake, in less than 5 hours. And on the dead man's chest, barely visible, so faint I might have been imagining it, there were marks. Not cuts. Not bruises. Impressions. 4 of them, spaced evenly across the sternum, as though something with very long fingers had rested its hand there. Gently. Almost tenderly. I'm writing this on April 14th, in my car, in the parking lot, 40 minutes before my shift begins. The sun is going down. The building is turning into a silhouette. I've thought about what I know and what I don't know, and I've tried to arrange it into something that makes sense. Here is what I have. There is a space below this building that doesn't appear on any plan. Elevator B accesses it. Something lives there, or visits there, or uses the elevator as a passage between wherever it is and wherever we are. It comes when we receive the dead. It goes to cold storage. It does something to the bodies, not violent, not destructive, but extractive. It takes something from them. Weight. Heat. Some measurable quantity that wasn't supposed to leave. The building systems are aware of this. The phone system has an extension for it. The elevator knows its floor. The temperature logs lie to accommodate it. The intake database briefly acknowledges its deliveries before erasing them, as though the system is dreaming, producing information it can't consciously hold. And it's getting more active. More present. More visible. As though a process that was once covert is becoming overt. As though something is being completed, slowly, intake by intake, body by body, and whatever it is, it's approaching a threshold. I don't know what happens when it reaches it. But last night, for the first time, I noticed something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. I was reviewing the intake log, routine, start of shift, and I saw my own name. Not as a receiving technician. As an entry. Vance, E., intake pending. Drawer 31. It was there for approximately 3 seconds. Then the screen refreshed, and it was gone. Drawer 31. The one at the far end of cold storage. The one with the warm surface and the body-shaped shadow. The one that was assigned by an entry that erased itself in February. My drawer. It already has my drawer. I'm going inside now. My shift starts in 10 minutes. Elevator B is at the far end of the east corridor, in the dark, behind doors that may or may not be open. The indicator might be lit. I think tonight it's going to show the dash. And I think, eventually, I'm going to find out what floor that is.